countrymen, all the folks who are tuning in live to Sweenie's Take. This is episode 6, coming to you from YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. Although I just got a note from my team, unfortunately, about 30 minutes ago, TikTok has now banned me from going live with no justification. For those of you who are longtime followers, first-time callers type of situations, I've been banned on going live on Instagram, despite me doing about 175,000 followers in a year with no basis whatsoever until November. Simultaneously, you have some of the most violent people, objectively violent people on the left, completely unfettered whenever they want to go live on any platform, and not only independently and unilaterally able to go live on any platform, but being bathed in the most positive characteristics across the New York Times and pretty much every broadband publication in the United States. Meanwhile, and no matter when you're watching this, if it's live, if it's 2 days from now, if it's on Spotify later when it gets published, I challenge any person out there, okay? And this goes across to my 250,000 followers across all platforms right now, to name a single word, sentence, phrase, thought, despite my being extremely active on social media, that comes anywhere close to suggesting I would ever be okay with political violence. And so this is not what this episode is about, but I just want to start off with that because for those who have been supporters of mine and following along, what's happening to me in real time, this censorship is insane. And it is not a conspiracy theory to believe that at any moment where you're watching me now, with the exception of perhaps Rumble, I could be taken down at any moment. They could block and restrict all of my accounts. We've seen countless people in the past how this happened to them, and you've got zero rights to appeal. And that's what so many folks have a problem with when it comes down to, let's call it technocrats, and the power that big tech has in our democracy to fully silence people. And again, I don't want to belabor this point, but this is coming to you fresh. This wasn't even part of the script. 30 minutes ago, I'm banned from going live on TikTok in addition to Instagram. But nonetheless, I have a good episode for you guys. My episodes are always 30 minutes. I keep them moving pretty efficiently and methodically. And what I wanted to do this episode, and I'll give you a preview, is go through some of the biggest events that happened over the past week. There were too many to kind of focus on just one to make that the theme of this 30 minutes. So I'm going to go through a couple. And if this is your first time tuning into Sweenie's Take, I always say thank you, thank you, thank you. I know how precious your guys' time is. I know that you only have one life on this beautiful earth. And so for you to spend any amount of that time with me is a blessing beyond belief. And before we get started, I always like starting and ending my episodes with a little piece of beauty that we can experience together. If there's one thing I like to consider myself, it is unlike any other, especially in the space of political media. And I think a lot of times we see different people who have become what we believe to be pundits or talking heads or caricatures of themselves, sort of controlled by different entities and different forces here in the United States. I can promise you one thing, that I will never be that. I've never wanted that. I've always wanted to just be myself. And I'm always reminded of Allen Iverson, for those of you out there that know ball, when he was asked about, who do you model yourself off of? And he said something to the effect, and I won't butcher this quote. He's talking in the locker room, and Allen Iverson says, when I look back in my career, I don't want to be like Michael. I don't want to be like Larry Bird. I don't want to be like Magic Johnson or Isaiah or none of them. I want to look back in my career and say, I did it my way. That's the only thing I've ever wanted when I started this movement a year ago, and it's the only principle I've stuck to as a defining ethos all along. And I've said this countless times, but it's worth revisiting right now. The only person that agrees with me on everything is me. And it's likely that you won't agree with me on everything, but the one thing I can promise you will feel is that I'm being true. And I believe in the truth, and I believe that the truth can be seen and attained through civil debate and dialogue, through exposition, through articulation, through illumination. I believe the truth exists, an objective truth. I don't believe there's a subjective truth. And I believe that my goal and my duty as someone who has, let's call it a following, let's call it a platform, my duty is to tell you what I perceive to be the truth, uncontrolled, unfiltered. And if that comes with people trying to censor me, then who's to blame? Is it the person telling the truth or the person's trying to stifle it? And here's a little bit of truth to get you guys started. And whenever I share things, I never go beyond a minute. I know that your time is valuable, but sometimes you need to hear these things, and this will be just a minute. Here is a beautiful, beautiful song Probably another example of separating the art from the artist, which I'm a big proponent of. Here is Sugar Mountain, which I'm going to listen to you by Neil Young. From his album Decade. Just listen though. I won't even talk. It's just beautiful. No sounds, just acoustic. And I'm not going to play the whole thing. Don't worry, just a snippet. Maybe there's someone out there that's the first time hearing this. Let me put you on game. Just listen to how beautiful this song is, okay? Just a certain person with their guitar.
Oh, to live on Sugar Mountain with the barkers and the colored balloons. You can't be 20 on Sugar Mountain, though you're thinking that you're leaving there too soon.
He had this high voice that always brings forth such an aching feel of nostalgia and melancholy. Listen to this line. This one's always stuck with me. This one right here.
It's so noisy at the fair, but all your friends are there. And the candy floss you had, and your mother and your dad.
Ain't that the truth, ladies and gentlemen? That sentiment he expresses. It's so noisy at the fair, but all your friends are there. So much of our lives is trying to be productive and finding solace in isolation. But another half of us is a social animal. And I think Neil Young does a good job of identifying that. It might be chaos and melee outside and lowbrow superficiality, but all your friends are there. And you can't lock yourself up into a cage for too long, even though that's exactly what I've done in this movement for the past 12 months. But moving on, wanted to get to the key pieces of politics today, notwithstanding my recent censorship, and notwithstanding Neil Young. One of the biggest events from this week was Mamdani's announcement that he would be, and then he retracted this, which I'll get to, mandating IDs to use his government-funded grocery stores. And I'll let this play and you'll hear it from him himself. And I will give you a couple comments on why that is the most outlandishly hypocritical, illogical, and absurd policy you could ever imagine coming from the left. And that's a high bar coming from the left. And I'll break down exactly why, but watch this firsthand. And he passes the buck. He doesn't want to say it's a policy of his. He lets some spokesperson say it.
Taking advantage of that, that deal, basically, and is there going to be a limit on the number of items that someone can take that are discounted at that level from that essential basket?
So our RFP makes very clear that this is a program for New Yorkers to be able to put food on the table, not a program for people to be able to make a quick buck through reselling. I'm going to pass it over to...
You see how he does that? And I'm going to let the rest of this play. But just such a politician answer. You ask him these questions, and they're like reptilian. They're like amphibious. They're like, well, I just think New Yorkers should have a place to eat. Watch what he says.
Our EDC head, G. Pat, to add some additional details.
Yes, if you look at our RFP for the operator, we are looking to make sure that we target New Yorkers, whether it be at sort of a library card-esque thing or an...
Oof! A library card-esque thing. Let me just reverse into the driveway a little bit. What is he talking about? Let me frame this picture for you guys crystal clear so you can see the Van Gogh or the Monet or the Manet in every paintbrush stroke, okay? Mamdani has proposed government-funded grocery stores, and they will offer groceries at 30% less than their competitors. Who are their competitors? Mostly persons of color, okay? Mostly persons of color in groceries in areas where there are other groceries that are owned by first and second generation immigrants. He's going to undercut them and put them out of business. And how can he do so? Is it through brilliant gap accounting? No, it's because if the government is running a business, it has a check every month. It doesn't need to rely on cutting costs or producing a better quality product because it has a check in the form of your tax dollars every single month. That's why I can undercut the market by 30% and put a bunch of persons of color out of business. And who's doing that if you want to look at it through a racial lens? The DSA. And what is the DSA? 90% white. Think of it through that framework. So he's proposing government-run grocery stores at prices 30% less than everyone else in the market, which will destroy the market. People have no choice but to go there. However, to check against the potentiality that non-New Yorkers might come in there and buy up all these products, then, you know what, later go and resell them. His spokesperson said, we're going to mandate not an ID, because that would be too abrasive for the left to say, and we'll get to why, but a library card-esque type of documentation. Of course she means ID, but we know of how much of a hot button issue that is in the left because they have spent the last 3, 4, 5 years straight convincing us, everyone who's got brain matter and a pulse and brain activity, that, or trying to convince us that our wanting voter ID laws is somehow racist because people who live in communities that are mostly persons of color have a harder time finding the DMV than those who live in some white suburbia. Now, if anyone out there is actually breathing, we know that that is completely not true because we see what's happening in Europe. And what I always say to anyone that's even remotely politically curious is that if you want a forecast of American politics, just look at Europe. They are 5 years down the drain ahead of us or behind us or further descending than us, what other sort of qualification you want to use. And what are they doing specifically in the EU? They are letting in waves of migrants. And notwithstanding the empathy every Christian person should say, or any humanistic person should have to people who are less fortunate than us, there needs to be limits on migration. They are letting in waves of migrants from other countries, and then they are actively, explicitly vocalizing their intention to grant these people voting rights. That's why the left in the United States of America doesn't want voter IDs, because it wants to make these millions of folks, and understand this point crystal clear, because it is of utmost existential importance right now in American politics. Biden lets in 20 million. I don't know what the statistic is. Let's say between 10 and 20 million. Let's give him a little favors wherever he's at, whatever nursing home he's in right now. He lets in between 10 and 20 million illegal immigrants from the southern border. The left wants to, not out of their altruism and generosity, get these people voting rights, if not today, if not tomorrow, if not a year from now, 5, 10 years from now, because they understand these folks, if their policies and their party let them in, will vote for them. It is a purely self-interested and not selfless endeavor in wanting to strike the requirement that you would need an ID to vote. And this is what we'll fully back in the driveway on. Mamdani on one hand is saying, you need an ID to go get a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread or some of those Sour Patch Kids or Sour Straws, which are fire, but you should not need an ID to go and vote, which is the cornerstone of our republic. Think about that hypocrisy. Think about that juxtapose. It's utterly insane, and there's no basis or justification for it. And in fact, Mamdani the very next day, presumably pestered by his radical left on that juxtaposition and on that hypocrisy, has an interview with I don't know who, disclaiming that, saying, actually, no, we won't require an ID. But then, which is worse, folks? If he wants an ID to make sure that only citizens can buy groceries at 30% less than their competitors, what is striking his ID requirement saying? That thousands, if not millions, in a city like New York, of folks who are here potentially illegally will now be able to get groceries cheaper than American citizens who pay taxes and follow our laws. That is what we're currently living in. And I hope you understand that, because right now in our day and age, there's so much gaslighting going on where they will try to convince you that what you're seeing before your very eyes isn't actually happening. And this is just an iconic example of that voter ID requirement and how it is based in just complete, utter illusion. And that's one thing that happened this week, but there's a lot more that indicate just the red line of what America is at and where we're at as a country and where we're at as a republic. And I think another poster child for this dissension, let's call it, into radicality, and for those of you who are up in your politics, you'll know who this woman is Francesca Hong, a DSA member who is running for governor of Wisconsin, okay? This woman, and thank God we live in a day and age where any person on the left's efforts to sort of cover up their tracks at all of these deplorable things that they've said can come to light. And I'm not talking about stupid comments people said when they were back in high school or college on Facebook, whatever. Everyone was young. Everyone made mistakes. That is a time in your life where you're supposed to figure out who you are as a person. But if you're making deplorable statements when you are a full-grown adult without any satire, and you are in a position of public power and public influence, that warrants a much higher level of scrutiny. And that's exactly what Francesca Hong was doing. Once she had already reached her, let's call it political maturity, her political birth, She was one of the forefront leaders and vanguards of the Abolish Police. And don't listen to me, just listen to it for yourself, okay? This is her talking about defunding the police. And like I said, these clips will never go longer than a minute, but they're worth listening to, very crystalline and very focused, because words matter. And trying to erase them years does not help the fact that they were made and they were meant.
The law was state-sanctioned violence, and then get excused for violating people's rights because they aren't expected to know the law. Minneapolis police spent nearly $5 million to defund the police, protect Black lives, and build a care community. This is what we need.
I mean, it couldn't be more clear as day. Defund the police, dismantle police unions, end qualified immunity. This woman should not be in charge of a hot dog stand. She should not be in charge of one of those lemonade stands you see in suburbia where they're selling a pitcher for 25 cents. She should not be delegated that much responsibility, much less all the power embedded in the chief executive and the leader of a state. Could you imagine being a cop right now in Wisconsin? You're wearing 40 pounds of gear. Every morning you're waking up and you're kissing your wife and your children, or your husband if it's a female cop, goodbye. And you are knowing when you're driving away and pulling out of that driveway, that might be the last time you will ever feel the warm embrace of your loved ones, because you are putting yourself in the line of fire every single day to protect sometimes people who have been convinced and brainwashed by left-wing media to hate you. You still show up at their place when there's a knock in the night. No, Francesca Hong, we do not need to abolish the police. We need to support the police. And I, as long as there is air in my lungs, will support the police, just like I will support the firemen, as long as I am breathing. And that's not to say that every police organization and every cop out there is perfect. No one has ever said that, cops included. But to suggest defunding the police would ever be a remotely logical idea, much less an idea espoused by someone with state power, is like living in the Twilight Zone. You really can't make this stuff up. And this is someone who the modern day DSA is pushing as kind of this Obama-esque type. She's talking about rolling her sleeves up and being a dishwasher. Well, listen, Francesca, I too worked minimum wage. I too did every job in the book. The difference between us is that I was not resentful to folks that had more than me when I was going through that phase of my life. I wanted to be rich. I didn't hate the rich. I understood that to make it in this world and to make it in America, it doesn't come through whining. It doesn't come through jealousy. It doesn't come through enmity at those who have worked harder before me. It doesn't come at this projection of insecurity at the folks out there who might have more possessions than I do. Making it in this world comes through not making excuses, no matter the circumstances that you find yourself in, and not blaming others for your misfortune, but taking responsibility for the situation that you're in. And don't give me this working man's hero, Francesca Hong, especially so many of these members of the DSA. Some of them, and the most of them, I would say throughout their entire, I think, 150,000 fellow memberships, are Ivy League grads of these Harvard and Northeastern schools that have soaked themselves in air-conditioned classrooms, buried in textbooks that they can't see the forest through the trees. You guys don't know what it means to be part of the working class because you were never part of it. Just like Zohran Mamdani, born of a trust fund, second homes in Uganda where they don't have a PDOT terror tax, yet he wants to espouse this, part of the labor class, part of your tired and weary masses. You've never been one of them, and neither have a lot of these people in the DSA. And even if Francesca Hong has worked her way up through that, she is just soaked with this level of psychotic insecurity and jealousy at other folks out there, and is making enemies, and is being uber divisive. And it's not just the things she says about police. This woman, I want you to understand how dangerous putting someone like this, who said the things that she has said, into public office is. Here she is talking about, in no unclear terms, because we like to do the gaslighting and like to tell people we're looking at something that we're not. Here's her talking about President Trump and what she'd like to do to him.
In the restaurant industry, when we're out of something, we say it's 86. And I'd say it's about fucking time we 86 Trump.
What does that mean?
It represents the utter failure of our government to keep us safe from threats, both viral and systemic.
Interesting. The woman who wants to abolish police is criticizing Trump and alluding to political violence against him because he is not doing enough to protect the public, sure, let's give it to Francesca Hong. Let's let her take the mantle and dismantle police stations and police departments. The person who wants to dismantle and deconstruct the body in the vanguard, protecting her from all the rampant criminality out there, thinks that someone else isn't doing a good enough job at protecting the public. Do you see this happening and unfolding before your very eyes? It's this broadband psyop. And it grows day and day, it metastasizes, and people who are calling for political violence, just like Francesca Hong obviously is there when she's talking about 86ing Trump, are not being shouted down by the Democrat Party. They're not being referred to as the black sheep of the family. They're not being described and characterized as irrelevancies or chaff or existing in some fringe periphery. They are being given more and more power, more and more platforms, more and more influence. And one of the most iconic examples is Hassan Piker. Here's what Hassan Piker had to say this week about what he'd want should the left take state power from the right. Listen to this because it is objectively dangerous and terrifying.
Arrest and prosecute and bring about corruption charges for every prominent member of this administration that is...
Let me pause that real quick. Who started arresting politicians as soon as the beacons of power are transferred via a democratic election? We all know who it is. It was the left. When they spent every single year of Trump's first term trying to find ways not to democratically defeat him once his term was over, but to throw him in jail or impeach him. For the first time in American history, and we're going back 250 years, you don't think there are other opportunities for partisan sides to rally around and try to indict their opposition? For the first time in American history, a former president was arrested by the left. And if there's anything Donald Trump has showed vis-a-vis the left, and I call this a radical take, it's not. He has shown outlandish restraint. If he did one iota, they raided his home. Remember that in Mar-a-Lago? No-knock warrant, bunch of feds rifling through probably his wife's drawers, his medicine cabinets, the holiest of holies. We forget about that, right? For a few documents being misplaced, what was that? If he did one grain of sand versus the Sahara Desert of what the left did to him, this would be World War III. They would be talking about fascism, totalitarianism, authoritarianism, about someone who's breaching every tenet of the Constitution, about someone who's bringing the death knell of the Republic. But since it's the left and they control mainstream dogma and mainstream orthodox and have Hollywood in their pocket, they get a pass. Trump has shown tremendous restraint. And then you got folks like Hassan Piker this week saying, you know what, if the left takes power, let's throw them all in jail. That's what he's saying. It could not be more explicit. And listen to what else he says.
Engaged in corruption and prosecute and arrest ICE agents that have also done crimes as well on the job. That would be a platform position that I would want to see from the Democratic Socialists of America.
Arrest and prosecute members of ICE who have also broken the law. Let's just take two cases of ICE examples, okay? Renee Nicole Good and Alex Purdy. Those garnered the most media attention. There was an investigation underway. Do you not believe in justice? In fact, I think investigations are still underway into theirs. And so what is that implicitly admitting from Hassan Piker? Not that he believes in our justice system, but that he believes in our justice system only when it goes his way. Okay? If a jury of their peers, even if it does come to a point of an arrest, which I don't think it will in either of those two cases, if a jury of those two folks, of the ICE officers' peers, if they were to be indicted or arrested for those killings, which again, I don't think they will be, were to let them off and find that they were not guilty for those killings, you can bet your bottom dollar that Hassan Piker would say that was a wrong verdict. What they want when they get in power isn't justice. they want revenge. And there's a fine line, but an ocean of difference between those two things. And hanging on those words and understanding really where that person is coming from, and that's from Hassan Piker, who has made more death threats and allusions and invitations to violence than really anyone in recent memory in American politics, yet he gets a New York Times front page cover about how he's the new darling in the manosphere. That's dangerous. I think a radical take is that anyone who is glorifying September 11th, which he's done repeatedly and then refused to retract and then put a newspaper clipping, should not be adored by the New York Times. I don't think that's radical at all. Should not be anyone that is associated with, for the most part, in mainstream politics, yet he has become kind of this poster child or just emblem of the new left. And Bernie Sanders had a quote about it the other day. They asked him and Bernie said, you know what, I wouldn't have made that statement, but Hassan's got a lot of followers and a lot of influence. And it's a big tent, meaning, we don't agree with everything he says, but he's welcome inside the tent. Where was all of that when there were radicals endorsing Trump? Right? And every single mainstream outlet on the left was calling for him to viciously denounce and reject those endorsements. If Trump were to say, well, it's a big tent and those guys got a lot of influence, you don't think that the world of the liberal left would explode? This is what I mean about the double standards. And this is what I mean about a gross misdirection, mischaracterization, and misrepresentation going on before our very eyes. And, it comes down to more than incitements to violence. It comes down more than abolish the police. It comes down to, when it comes down to the modern day left, a fundamental misunderstanding of the role and the place of government. And there was a quote that went super viral this week from Pete Buttigieg, where he was talking about the prospect, and I'm going to share it, and it's about a minute here too, about how the United States could get out of this situation that we're in, where we are not getting enough out of government. And listen to what his solutions are. And this was this week. It went crazy viral.
Right. Whenever we figure out a way to make sure you can't hide all of your wealth or all of your income from being fairly taxed, very wealthy people will figure out some other place to hide it.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to develop a new policy to deal with that. But I guess my point is that's okay. Too often, we have just hesitated to do anything, refused to do anything because it might be hard or because it might not last.
Yeah.
But if the idea that somebody will figure out a way around this law meant that you shouldn't have the law, that would be an argument against having any law.
Mm-hmm.
So it's messy, it's hard. But I am sure that if we had a more reasonable rate of taxation on...
Wait for this. Again, dive at every word. You have to use microscopes for these people. If we had a more effective rate of taxation, we'll go on.
Capital gains.
On capital gains.
Income. And if we made it harder to pass along wealth without, especially inherited wealth, without paying any taxes on it,
It's not
or
true.
some of these other maneuvers like this borrowing thing.
There's an estate tax.
We would have a fairer country because we'd still have capitalism. There'd still be lots of motivation and lots of reason to innovate and build a business and create jobs and do all the things that very wealthy people have done. And also, we would be out of this doom loop we're in where they're saying, well, we can't possibly have as good health care as other countries. We couldn't possibly do something like, fast trains here in the United States. We couldn't...
Dive at that, and I want to stop it right there, okay? What is he saying? He's saying that if we increase taxes, America would be in a better place. And he references that better place, that Shangri-La, that city on the hill, that utopia in his eyes, as being a United States with faster trains, like they have in Japan, like they have in China, like they have all over the world. Let me tell you something right now, Peter, okay? California has spent, I think it was starting in 2015, billions and billions and billions of tax dollars in a state that keeps on increasing, just like he's proposing, in increasing taxes on a high-speed rail system that has a little bit more than a handful of dust to show for it, maybe a mile or two of alloy laying on the ground. That is the result of government intervention in America. No, I'm sorry, you are philosophically, elementally, and fundamentally mistaken, Peter. The solution is not more government. The solution is less government. And is that a radical opinion, less government? Is that some right-wing think tank? No. What is less government supposed to be here in America? I think we just check the Constitution. The framers envisioned less government. And America, at least through FDR, built a global preeminent country on less government. It saw its rates of progression, of excelling, not through state intervention. Those were tried and tested in the 20th century, and capitalism and low government regulation and tape cutting and freeing the stallion that is the American spirit running across the Great Plains, that lack of government intervention and that fundamental unchaining of the private sector gave us moon landings, rocket launches, every single invention, which are too long to even name in hours of live streaming, and made America what it is today. And there are countless examples of how giving more money and resources to the government doesn't necessarily fix problems. Look no further than the Department of Education in New York City public schools. Right now in New York City, we're spending close to $44,000 per student for some of the lowest test results. And that ties part and parcel with California high-speed rail, because what does it show? Unequivocally, without any gray area or ambivalence, it shows that the solution isn't pouring money into an inefficient entity, which the government is absolutely archetypical of. It is using money efficiently in the private sector, okay? Private schools are not suffering from these low and plummeting test scores. Because what happens when the government takes your money? Taking my money or your money or whoever's listening to this right now is not taking A and giving the money to B, be they a teacher in Harlem, okay, or a teacher in Queens, or post office worker, whatever the case might be. What the government is taking money, is A, taking money from B, and instead of just giving it to C, giving it to a bureaucracy that is swollen, that is inefficient, that is grifting, that is thieving, that is a den of thieves. That's why we have the inefficiencies that we do. The efficiencies don't come from public spaces. The efficiencies come from private spaces for the very simple reason is no one is more careful with spending their money than yourself. And no one is more reckless when they're spending money if they're spending someone else's, okay? These are fundamental tenets of economics that pretty much no economics individual or economist worth their salt can even disagree on. And there's a famous quote by Milton Friedman, which I think is pretty iconic of this sentiment, along the lines of, if you put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, they'd be out of sand in 5 years. Isn't that the truth? We look all around us, public works compared to private industry versus public. The examples could not be more glaring. The solution Peter Buttigieg and Francesca Hong and Hassan Piker and Mamdani is not more government, it is less government. And one individual who I think does as good a job of any is Friedrich Hayek. And there's a quote of his, I think it was close to around the age when he passed away, where he was asked what would his legacy and what would be his final message. And for those of you who don't know who that is, he is one of the strongholds and staples of Austrian economics and was awarded pretty much every medal under the sun for his work in economics, especially price systems within the broader market and price signals. But here's what he had to say about what sort of legacy he would leave back to the folks when he's gone from this earth, about what has given civilization this driving force in the steam engine. Let's listen to him together.
If you could leave a short statement for the future generations, and that would sum up everything that was meaningful and significant to Frederick von Hayek, what would that statement be?
Modern civilization, which enables us to maintain 4 billion people in this world, was made possible by the institution of private property.
Private property.
It's only thanks to this institution that we achieved an extensive order far exceeding anybody's knowledge. And if we destroy that moral basis, which consists in the recognition of private property, I think we will destroy the sources which nourish present-day mankind and create a catastrophe of starvation beyond anything mankind has ever experienced.
So there you have it from one of the most laureled economists this world has ever seen, discussing how private property and not state intervention and not government managed economies has resulted in the progress of civilization, the likes of which had never been experienced before in any other century. I think it's wise to remember what these folks have said and to read deeply into what economists on both sides of the aisle really are saying about how an economy is managed and how markets work and how prices are communicated through those markets. And today, I think that's lacking, especially in the DSA, which is intellectually barren and intellectually hollow. And I hope I've sort of conveyed that to you via a few of these kind of talking points that they've made and shown you that they are inherently insecure people. They are inherently jealous people, and their positions and platforms and ideologies come less from intellectual rigor and scrupulousness than they come from their own psychology, which is hating those who have more than them. That is the honest to God truth, and that is the empirical evidence that we can see across the board. And so I promised you guys that I would take comments, and I'm looking through them right now, or questions, and I can't really see many. I just see some comments, but I promised I'd address them. And so here's addressing a few. It's a joke the way our taxes are managed, please. I mean, someone out there is listening. After all the fraud is exposed, hearing these heathens ask for more of our money in the form of higher taxes, it's forcing people to fight back violent feelings. I don't encourage violence at all. But I understand that enmity, right, that a lot of people have when they're seeing taxes go up and up and up and their quality of living go down and down and down. It'd be one thing if higher taxes resulted in an outcome of this city of the future. It never has, and it never will. You can't name a single example where a country and a civilization has taxed itself into prosperity. Someone saying excellent, as always. I think Wally of Wally's Transportation is here. Next time, if you guys want to ask me, Sweeenie for mayor, you guys tell me, do we ride at dawn? Please debate Piker. Line them up. Happy to do it. I won't even prep. Defunding the police equals crime welcome here. You're exactly right. I'm glad there's people out there with a pulse. But look, I wanted to end this on a positive note, as I always try to do, and with a little bit of beauty, just like I started this. And so I'm going to leave you guys on this beautiful, beautiful Wednesday night as we kind of ease and coast into the weekend with another beautiful song that we can listen to and experience together. But I just want to say, again, thank you. I understand that your guys' time is incredibly valuable, incalculably valuable. It's the most valuable element and commodity on planet Earth is time. So I want to leave you this song, but I want to say thank you for tuning in to Sweeney's Take, episode 6. We are hot as a cattle prod and firing on all cylinders. I think the last Rumble stream had something close to 5,000 active watchers at one point. So thank you guys for all tuning in, and I will leave you this song. And remember, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you for coming. Here's Real Real by Sleigh Bells. And I'm going to let it fade. But this is all I got for you guys tonight. Have a